We woke early to make breakfast in the communal kitchen before departing town and jumping back on Camino Viejo, the old road. Last we left you, we were well into our journey from Cochabamba to Santa Cruz, when we stopped in Samaipata for the night, before continuing to Bolivia's industrial capital. We continued our descent of Highway 7 through the Andean foothills and along the flanks of Amboró National Park. And a bit more road construction. Before descending to the banks of the Pirai River. This is the elbow of the Andes, the easternmost point of the world's longest mountain range, where the Cordillera curves westward, following the Pacific coastline of the continent. And this, a unique bioregion called the Yungas, a narrow strip of cloud forest unique to Peru and Bolivia, where the eastern Andes plunge into the Amazon basin.
Hola, buenas.
¿De dónde viene, señor?
Santa Cruz.
Ya, listo, siga nomás.
Ya, muchas gracias.
And no sooner had we departed the mountains than we knocked out the last few kilometers to Bolivia's largest city, Santa Cruz de la Sierra. Far off the typical tourist track, linking the country's top 3 destinations of Uyuni, Sucre, and La Paz, Santa Cruz remains relatively obscure, despite being Bolivia's commercial hub and wealthiest city. Having officially checked it off the list, we had originally intended to return to Cochabamba along Camino Nuevo, completing the circuit on our way to La Paz. But, as often happens, something shiny caught Chad's eye.
Whoa, what is that?
Whilst Googling cool to do in Santa Cruz. And what started as a detour was about to become a much longer detour. 1,000 kilometers longer, to be exact, as we added another loop, connecting the half-dozen or so 300-year-old Jesuit missions dotting eastern Bolivia, some of the last remaining on the South American continent. Essentially, when combined with our original loop from Cochabamba, creating a very lopsided figure 8 through the heart of Bolivia. We set off in the morning across the flat and fertile Rio Grande o Huapai River Basin for San Javier in the Provincia Velasco Mountains. Blissfully unaware that the steady rainfall that accompanied us was just the beginning of a seasonal storm that would flood the region.
Número de carnet.
No hay.
¿No tienes?
No, sin factura o...
Ya.
Yeah, gracias. Right.
Starving, cold, and I need to pee.
After what ended up being a long, cold, and wet day of riding, we arrived in the hamlet of San Javier to find the mission closed for the day. But both soaked to the bone and starving, we elected to tour the city's food court.
Sopa de nani, pollo al horno. I think I'm gonna probably eat here.
Before seeking shelter, a hot shower, and a dry bed for the night.
It's gotten to that point.
The mission of San Javier, our first stop on the circuit, is not only the oldest, founded in 1691, but the first to be restored in the 1970s, as well as the first recognized as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1990. Originally a music school, The San Javier mission is unique among the others in the region. Its whitewashed, carved wood columns and beams give it a much airier and brighter feel than its counterparts. And along with the traditional buildings lining the plaza and the rustic charms of the city itself, was the perfect introduction for our tour. The Jesuits, a Catholic sect founded in Spain in 1540, arrived in Bolivia sometime around 1690, and immediately set off doing what missionaries do: convert. And while the Spanish crown had a dubious reputation in this part of the world, the Jesuits were generally well received, due in large part to their humanitarian acts and emphasis on education. That said, many indigenous were forcefully relocated to these settlements or reductions to undergo their re-education. That was until the Jesuits were banished from the South American continent by King Carlo III in 1767. And while many of the communities lived on, the majority of the missions were either repurposed, abandoned, or outright demolished, making the small collection of missions in eastern Bolivia some of the last remaining of their kind. Which brings us to the city of Concepcion, just an hour down the road, and the home of our second mission on the circuit. Along with a small yet impressive museum just down the street, packed with many of the original wood carvings, Concepcion is arguably the most ornate of the missions. An impressive clock tower complements the chapel's bold facade, and inside its cavernous chapel, rich woodwork contrasts ornately painted walls, and a gold-gilded reredos towering over the altar. As luck would have it, we not only had the mission to ourselves, but had arrived just in time for a parade that seemingly materialized out of nowhere.
I don't know what happened. The whole town showed up. They're setting something up over there. These guys are ready to party. Everybody's gathered. I don't know what happened. How did we end up in the middle of a parade?
We always end up in the middle of a parade.
After taking a few pictures and answering more than a few questions, we took our leave in the midst of the fanfare.
Ciao, chicos. Ciao. Ciao.
And set off for our final stop of the day, and one more gas stop along the way.
We have some trucks here for diesel.
But the lone gas station in town had a massive lineup and no time for the likes of us. So, when in Rome, do as the Bolivians do. Rent yourself a container, a soda bottle funnel, and get in line. Topped off and ready for action, we were back on the road, dodging potholes under thankfully dry skies. Until it started raining again. Which also just so happened to be right about the time we came across the world's most laid-back transit cop. Unwilling to venture out of his shack, Chad had to hand-deliver his license before being allowed to proceed. Into the waning daylight and the city of San Ignacio de Velasco, our home for the night. Two missions down, 4 to go, and a whole lot of rain and mud to come.